Pause apparently.
Broadcast is
And we are
live.
live. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Presence Posse. Um, a few minutes late as we speak about presence and productivity. I, for one, find that a little ironic. But nonetheless, I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation today. We've got myself, Dr. Fred Blum. To my right, at least, is Danielle McMahon. Directly below her is Bobby Cobb. And to Bobby's right is Jan Hart. If you guys, that's why I'm glad the names are on the boxes because I don't think my view is the same as yours. But nonetheless, I'm glad to have you guys all with us today. And we're here to talk about presence and productivity, which I think is a very interesting, typically, like if you read the countless books about productivity and things that are out there, it tends to be a very external approach, which I think is legit, right? Like how to organize your stuff. Um, and then there are some systems that add a little bit of like mindset to it. Just kind of how to organize your mind to organize your life. You can tell I've tried a few of these. And then there are some that even go so far, like, for example, one is called Getting Things Done. You guys know this one?
Mhm.
GTD. It's fairly well known as these things go. And he literally talks about, like creating some degree of inner peace by creating an orderly environment, you know? So, um, but then again, there's the possibility of starting from a place of presence, right? Starting from a place of relative peace. And how will you then be productive in the world without sacrificing that piece? So maybe that's a good question to start with, right? Like, how do you get shit done and still have peace in your heart? Who'd like to take that one?
That's an interesting one. And I love what you've opened with, Fred, because yes, the strategies and the tools and everything else, they are useful
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you're coming from. So if you're
Ah,
coming from a place of urgency and not feeling good enough and insecure and all that, then all the tools and techniques can put you into a further spin and can make you less productive, and they can become a bit of a crutch. Whereas if you're starting from a place of already being peaceful and knowing your inherent value, that then the tactics and the tools are useful in that scenario because you're not distracted, um, and they can support you rather than get in your way.
yeah. So I hear two things in that. Um, One is starting from a place of peace can actually make your whatever tools you're using for productivity more effective. But secondly, which I think is maybe, for at least to me, more important, is what do we prioritize? Like, do we prioritize productivity or peace as the first thing? You know.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
what do you got to say about that, Bobby?
Well, I'm just thinking about a lot of you get bombarded if you've looked at one or two productivity apps on the internet. All of a sudden, every time you go to Facebook, they've got a new technique to use.
Most of
And
it should say get off Facebook.
yeah, yeah, good start.
Yeah.
Um, but it seems like those are focused so much on cramming more stuff in your day and planning things out into the future. And getting things done is kind of the only one, at least that I'm aware of, that really does focus on what do we need to do to clear our mind, to get the inner critic that's telling us you got to do more, you got to do more. What else can you do? How can you be more productive? Faster, 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 and get that silenced so that you can sit down and really focus on what we need to be doing. And I love the idea that you guys have both brought up of starting with prioritizing peace and calmness in your
Oh,
Oh,
hold on. Uh, I was going for something else, which is I'm wondering how to put your information on the bottom of the screen, how they always do that. And I don't see how to do it. Sorry about that. I interrupted.
That's okay. Although it's interesting, at least on my screen now, we've
rearranged
jumbled where we're showing up.
Right.
And beginning with that, beginning with the idea of, getting quiet enough in the beginning of the day or at the end of the previous day to sit down and say, okay, what do I really need to accomplish today? Where do I want to go? Where's the energy coming from? And trusting inner guidance a little bit more than becoming a slave to, a daily to-do list that, at least in my experience, it doesn't take very long when I've used those in the past to get way more things on them that I could possibly accomplish during the day. And, then all of a sudden that's increasing that mental static and creating a sense of overwhelm rather than, a sense of peace.
I think we're all pretty much going to die with like items still on our to-do list.
No
I think
doubt.
so.
What do you think, Danielle?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the productivity would be an external thing that we need to bring, right? I feel like it's much more efficient to do it from inside out. And even in the one that you were talking about where he's saying your external needs to be organized so that your internal or your thinking
Yeah.
can be organized. I think that's backwards. Like if you are you guys getting feedback?
Yes, we are.
Let me try without my.
Now we can't. You got to unmute.
Now you can hear me. Is that better?
I think it is.
I'll go
That'd
with
be your
that.
dog barking.
That's not my dog.
Oh, it's not. Okay, there we go. Go
So,
ahead.
at any rate, yeah, that's. I do think there is a mirroring to that, but I also think there's a cycle to productivity where you're not always going to be in the same energetic spot to get things done. Like sometimes being productive doesn't require doing.
Ah,
You just be. And other times it does. You're not going to get anything done if you don't take some action. But for instance, in putting on the retreat that I just had, there were times when I was very busy with it, times when I was quiet with it, and I got it done. And then I was very quiet for like the next week, not intentionally, but I found that I just needed that time to integrate the experience of it. So then I could come on Facebook Live and say, this is what it was like. But those first few days, I was just like, I'm baling hay and I'm taking care of stuff on the farm, provide for my ponies. And it was just, I needed a little bit of time. And I don't think that made it less productive. I think that made it more organized when I did come to say, okay, so this is what we experienced because I had the time to integrate that. And I think that's often the case, is that you just have to be aware of what part of the cycle of productivity you're in.
yes. Well, see, there's so many good things coming out of this conversation, which is not surprising. But so self-awareness, right? Like it's not just like this blunt instrument, like, which is kind of what Jan was saying. I think it's like we're just gonna like take my insecurity and all the stress and everything I have, and I'm just gonna take some tool and I'm gonna shove it all into that tool. And once again, I've found some external force to try and make me feel better about myself. Yeah. Which is, I often joke that that's the essence of 90% of self-help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it's not really changing anything here. It's just trying to make us feel better about it, And so I think there's something relevant in really valuable in what you guys are saying. And, I mean, we're the Presence Posse, right? We're not here to give you like better ways to organize your to-do list. We're here to learn to live from a state of presence, a state of well-being. And from that state of presence, we can, let our life flow from that, right? And being at peace with it, we're not going to get everything done.
No.
That our true well-being, dare I say, our worthiness is not really at stake. Because, I mean, I always talk about this, but it's like if you have the ego and the true self, right? And the degree to which we're caught up with, identified with the ego, the egoic version of ourselves, our worthiness is going to be tied to our external world, right? So our to-do list is going to feel almost like life and death in some way. And the more we learn to live from presence, the more we learn to come from that place of deep inner knowing, the true self side of the equation, the more that the to-do list it's just going to take on a different character. I don't know, quality. Yeah.
That's huge,
Fred,
right?
how come you think this is an ironic topic?
I don't think the topic is ironic, although the topic could be construed as ironic from that external perspective, right? Like you could say, screw presence, just tell me how to cram more, I want to get 5 pounds of stuff in the 3-pound bag. Somebody show me how to do that. Then you don't really want to know about presence, but that's not what I thought was ironic. I thought it was ironic, frankly, that I didn't prepare. Miriam, for regular viewers of our show, you guys know that it's usually Miriam who is the host, and she does a bunch of stuff that I didn't realize had to be done beforehand. And, and some people would say, I would probably argue this too, that I do really well in those, like my mind got super clear when I realized I had like 4 minutes to figure out how to use StreamYard. But I don't recommend it at the same time. I think that clarity was probably more of an adrenaline dump than true inner peace.
Yes.
So I think there's absolutely something to be said for, like scheduling my call so I didn't finish one, 10 minutes before I got on this one, etc.
Yeah.
It is that's an interesting thing, though, that there are a lot of people who kind of look at procrastination almost as a strategy to bring clarity. The fact that the deadline is looming almost forces people into a situation where by necessity they're having to shut everything else out. So they're only focusing on this task. So here's something that I'm curious as to what you guys think. What are ways that you've seen or that you've used to get into more of that, I guess, type of a flow state? And I don't like deadlines myself, and I have a real thing about being late. That my biggest sense of stress is when I'm running late for an appointment or something like that, and I have to rush at the end, and it's just self-induced stress. It's all the way that I process. But I've noticed in a lot of other people that that's a productive strategy. So what, if anything, do you guys do to get into more of a flow type state where you're being effortlessly productive?
Who'd like to jump on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump on just for a sec. It's a fascinating question, Bobby, because I have experience of doing it both ways. I used to be somebody that said I did well under pressure, but it's what Fred talked about. It was an adrenaline dump. And I would literally create a wall, an energetic wall that couldn't be penetrated while I was in that space. It was very unhealthy. It was unhealthy for me. It was unhealthy for the people that were around me because they couldn't get through to me. I wasn't there. Um, but it was a force. It was a forceful thing, and it felt forceful. Whereas more these days, I'm more inclined just to sit and be open
Yeah.
rather than to shut out and be closed in to a bubble. It's more about opening up and leaning into the vastness of who we really are, and listening for whatever guidance might come, and
Well,
following that. But
maybe say more about that, because when we use words like guidance, I understand that probably everyone has some sense of what that means, including
yeah,
who may be watching. But what does it mean to you when you say listen for guidance?
well, it can mean different things, Fred. In some context, it will be a voice, or sometimes if I'm with other people and I'm connected with other people, and that in that space, I'll go to say something and I'll hear, no, not yet. Um, or another really funny example that I didn't listen to was, a couple of years ago, we were celebrating a family birthday and we went into a restaurant, and I went to sit down and I heard, don't sit there. But I did, and the chair collapsed underneath me and I ended
Oh,
up on the floor with a fractured coccyx.
Oh,
So it can be that. It can also be a feeling, um, a sensory thing, or sometimes it's just a knowing of what to do next or what direction to point myself in. And it generally comes very quietly, very gently, with zero effort. And it doesn't come from up here, it comes from somewhere else. I don't know where exactly, but so it's not a cognitive thing.
yeah, thanks. Anybody? I think that's a worthwhile. I'd love to get other perspectives on this.
Mm, me
What's it
too.
like for you, Danielle?
For me, I don't function well when I put it off to the last minute. I generally don't get it done. Like I just don't do the whole adrenaline thing. Like there were people when I was in college that would pull all nighters. I'm sleeping. If it's not done, it's not getting done. So I don't function well that way anyway, and I'm more of a plan and prepare kind of a student, right? So that's how I function. That's the way my personality is. I do much better if I put the time in. I know what I'm doing and I take the steps along the way so that I don't feel overwhelmed. Because that's what happens is if I feel overwhelmed, I just shut down. Right? Like it doesn't put me into hyperdrive. Evidently, I have no hyperdrive. I don't know. I think in emergency situations I do, but I struggle a little bit learning to make priorities over urgency. Does that make sense? Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
can be less productive if I just respond to every urgent thing than if I actually can
hmm.
prioritize what's important to me and what's important to what I want to accomplish. And then there's less draw to just do the urgent things and not get things that are important to me done.
Bobby, Are you familiar with Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants?
Yeah.
Mm.
I'd love to hear whatever you have to say, but maybe you'd share that part too.
Yeah. So the 4 quadrants are on one axis, there's what is important. And on the second axis, there's what's urgent. And, we're drawn to, and I think those that use the adrenaline dump strategy are drawn toward that first quadrant that is both urgent and important.
Yeah.
Um, the second quadrant is that is important but not urgent. And, according to his teaching, and I think Roger Merrill was the guy who also was promoting that pretty heavily, is that stuff that is important but not urgent. And that is the first block that tends to get pushed away and doesn't get done. Then we've got those things that are urgent that are not important. And in that third quadrant, to me, that's where your list of 143 things to do can start to take over your life, because we can become addicted to just checking those boxes off of that third
There's a
quadrant.
little dopamine hit when you click it.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a release and a satisfaction and a dopamine hit that comes from that, and that can become very productive. And then the fourth quadrant, which I think somebody has called that the delegation station. Those are the things that are unimportant and non-urgent. Or you could look at that from an energetic standpoint. I've kind of played around with that a little bit and looked at the things that I love to do and really require no effort for me to get into that. I love writing and I love to think about articles, and I can just get lost in that. And, suddenly 2.5 hours have gone by and I'm just getting up because I finally have to go to the bathroom. But I can enter a flow state where we're doing that. So, the idea of getting rid of those things that are non-important, that are non-urgent, and you just don't like doing, to the degree that you can get those completely off your plate, maybe by paying somebody else to do them, is good. And, when I was in a corporate career, I never really had to make a to-do list at the end of my career, because I'd kind of, moved up into management. And my task list was just given to me. Things would rise up, and it was like I had my fire hat on all day, every day. And I got pretty decent at that. And it was, there was no planning involved because there was just fires that had to be put out all the time. So you could just show up and you really had to fight for those things that you want to do. These days my life is organized a little bit differently, and I can just kind of sit down in the morning, have a cup of coffee, watch the sunrise, or just the animals playing in the yard, and just wait for something to show up and go, that's what I'm going to do today. And sometimes what I'll do is take that and put it toward the end of my day and say, okay, what are some of the things that I haven't really wanted to do but are getting to the point that I've got to do that, and have that as my reward. That if I can knock these things out in the next 3 hours, then I can spend the next 3 hours on this thing that's really going to bring a lot of joy, and just a little bit of delayed gratification. And it is kind of almost like a mantra, like a bringing back to presence, that when I get distracted, I just think, no, I've got to focus. If I focus on this right now, then I get to spend a little bit of time making the video or writing the article or recording something that it's just going to be effortless to me from a work standpoint.
Brilliant.
Yeah, another element of that fourth quadrant, not urgent, not important, are also just going on social media or watching TV, things like that, which, I mean, it's funny because you get to sort of assign importance. Like maybe you need that time sometimes to just like let your brain relax and do nothing that requires a lot of attention. So it comes back, and I guess really to what Jan said. I think it was Jan where we were talking about self-awareness and just getting a sense of what you need in order to move forward. Bobby, before I go forward, did you want to answer about how you like your sense of inner knowing or how you gauge that?
Yeah, kind of. I build in to my day. Like, I hope I'm answering the question that you're asking. Like, I begin the day before I ever start work. I do a little yoga and a little meditation and just some contemplation. And then when I sit down, I just kind of quiet my mind and see what it is that I want and need to do that day. Then for me, it's only 11 o'clock in the morning. So typically after we've done our call here, I'll stop and have lunch. And then I always go on a walk. And I try to not think about work purposefully during that walk. I try to, orient myself to being as much in nature as possible. And sometimes that's all I do. But sometimes that's a moment where insights can occur and flashes of intuition can come in, and that gives me a little bit of guidance as well. So when my mind, and I pay a lot of attention. I don't remember who it was that introduced the idea of the mental tachometer, thoughts per minute, and I try to pay attention to that. When my mind starts to race, that's a signal to me to take a break and do something else just for a little bit, even if it's just making a cup of tea or spending a little bit of time with the dogs, and hopefully just create, focusing on that presence that you introduced the concept initially, Fred, of focusing on presence over productivity and not making it about trying to check off as many things as I can on my to-do list. Did I answer the question that you asked?
Yeah, I think the initial question had something to do with like how you kind of learn to, I think Jan originally said something about trusting our inner wisdom or some version of that. And because we talk about things like that, and for folks like us, because we spend a lot of time engaged in that world, even doing it professionally, it can be that. Hold on, I'm going to see if I can figure out that noise. It was Jan. I don't know. There was some background noise. I just put you on mute for a moment. But so, like we all have a certain intrinsic understanding of what we mean by inner knowing, because it's just something that we operate from. We talk to clients about it, whatever we do. But I wanted to just really give everyone just an opportunity to hear what you guys meant by it, because actually they were, kind of different, weren't they, between each of us? And for me, there's definitely, I like the term knowing, like Jen described it, because there's a sense sometimes of yes or no, to make it that simple, right? Do this, don't do that. What feels right in the moment. And it takes a little bit of time to be willing to trust that. At least it did for me. There's no guarantee that it's always right, but there's no guarantee that my logical brain is always right either. Part of the I guess we just have to sort of get used to the fact that there are no guarantees. Doing it with our, we could maybe I told this story because it's one that I tell a bit, but somebody who's been a mentor of mine named Steve Chandler. Some of you guys may know that name. And Steve is a coach and an author. He's written like 40 books. So, and 40 books, by the way, in probably the last 20 or 25 years. So it's a lot of books. I mean, it's like 2 a year. And I mean, so that should tell you something about Steve's level of organization, right? But if you meet Steve, maybe he wouldn't fit like what you'd expect him to look like, because he's super laid back. And the story is that he was one of several coaches that were being considered to coach some big Fortune 100 CEO kind of guy. And Steve was his last interview, and he says, all right, you're my final guy. I'm going to make a decision this week. This is my impression of what a Fortune CEO talks like. He hands Steve this notebook, spiral notebook, like a loose leaf notebook, with his 5-year plan in it. And in this, this thing is printed in like 4 colors in page protectors. And it's like this thing, Steve would joke, like, this guy has it scheduled when he's going to pee. Like, everything is scheduled out. And Steve, being Steve, he's very laid back. I got a very kind of dry, deadpan sense of humor. He flips through a couple of pages, hands it back to the guy, and says, frankly, that looks like the most fear-based thing I've ever seen in my life. Now, you can imagine that probably got the guy's attention. But you can probably also imagine what a lot of the other coaches who got it would have said. All right, we're going to create an accountability plan, and we're going to, set goals, and nothing wrong with that, But maybe, knowing Steve a little bit, maybe there was something that Steve picked up in this guy's manner, his energy, that said, this guy doesn't need help with organization. He needs help with what Steve would call, what I would call also slowing down, So, guess who got the job, by the way? So I think that's the thing. And Stephen Covey said that too, right? Smooth is fast. No, slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Right? Have you guys heard that before?
Yeah.
So this
I
idea,
haven't, but I love that.
Yeah, it's great, right? So the idea of slowing down, even like I had like literally, I was joking with you guys before we went on live, like 4 minutes to figure out how to use StreamYard to put this thing together, because I literally hadn't done it and hadn't thought maybe I should check this out before. So there was literally a part of me that said, slow down. Because I'm like trying to type things in the computer and I keep making mistakes. I'm going, damn it. And then I had to say, all right, slow down, And what's the worst thing that could happen is we may be 2 minutes late for the show. But let's do it slow. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast, right? I do martial arts. I've done martial arts for a long time, and it's the same thing. We actually practice, and this is not common actually, but we practice very slowly because we're trying to train the nervous system to not go into that fight or flight response when presented with a threatening situation. To treat a threatening situation almost as though someone were putting out their hand to shake your hand, and to have the same kind of energetic response to that, except that now maybe you're making somebody fall down, which you don't typically do when they shake your hand. But it's the same idea. You don't have to have a lot of frenetic, intense, angry energy tied to it. And sometimes, at least in theory, because you didn't do something like there's this thing called mirror neurons, right? So if somebody is aggressive towards me and I'm aggressive back to them, now it's going to just create that fight or flight response even more so in them, right? But the story is, and this is true in certain martial arts like Aikido, the art I train, which is called Sistema, that if I stay calm, and even let's say something happens and you have to put this person onto the ground, the theory is that they go, oh crap, sorry, I maybe this was a bad idea. Like they actually have a chance to get out of that aggression because you've given them a different possibility. So maybe we're actually outside of the scope of this conversation, but presence in something else, that'll be a different topic. But the idea of the stay, I mean, because presence is presence, right? It's not like you bring a different presence to productivity than you do to relationships or you do to fighting, you know? When we're more present, I just think we're more productive,
Yeah.
meaning we produce the results that are most appropriate in whatever the given situation is.
Yeah.
Rosalie says, like the tortoise and the hare,
Here, yeah.
you know? So what else?
Yeah, I actually think that is spot on to this subject, because what I'm hearing is you're describing your practice of doing it slowly is training your body to recognize when the panic is setting in and becoming so familiar with a sense of inner peace, even when you're in a potentially violent situation, that you can stay present. And I've noticed when, as people start to slow down and become more aware of the signals that their bodies are sending them, then, when that mental static comes in, Jan talked about the knowing, and that the knowing isn't always verbal. It's not all. In fact, in my experience, it's never a conversation. If it's a word, it's going to be a word or two. You may get a yes or a no or something like that. But often it's just a feeling that you think of something and you're like, "Yep, that's it." And there's no words involved in it at all. I had an interesting thing this weekend. I went to this really big garden center, and my girlfriend was there, and she's looking for something to plant a particular plant in, and she was struggling between the two. And it's her plant, but I come walking up to where she was, and she's like, I've narrowed it down between these two. What do you think? And I looked at him and I picked the one that I like. And I could see she had this letdown reaction. And so I grabbed the other one and put it in the basket. And she said, you said you like the other one. And I said, yes, but you said you like this one. And she said, I didn't say anything. And I said, you didn't, but your body did. I mean, her other than conscious communication was just, and that's an interesting technique that, if you ask somebody else between two things, there is, and you have a hoping and they pick the other one, just go with the one that's the one your guidance is telling you that you actually wanted. And
there's a technique for that. How does that work? Like oh God, we used to talk about is Michael Neal. If you guys, I know.
Flip a coin.
What?
Flip a coin.
Yeah, tell that story. Sorry, Bobby, do you mind if she shares this?
No. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. That's perfect.
Yeah, he tells the story. He uses it in the context of decision making or problem solving, but can't make your mind up. And he says, pick heads or tails, flip the coin, and you'll know by your reaction what you want and what your decision is. Or
right. So you have to decide, like,
whether you're delighted or disappointed.
Yeah, it's a really clever way to do it.
It's very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Bobby. Sorry.
Well, and kind of tacking onto that's listening to the wisdom and the guidance that comes from within. And I think the challenge for a lot of people, particularly going back to the to-do list, is wisdom whispers to us. It's talking constantly, but it's talking quietly. And when we in a normal thing, if we've got a lot on our mind, if we're time traveling, going out into the future, trying to figure things out, that's loud and it's mental static. And it, you hear the phrase, the noise in my head is so loud, I literally can't hear myself think. And I think that maybe we could change that to say, my thinking is so loud that I literally can't hear myself feel, because my experience is that knowing is a feeling, and we know that when it's right. And the coin flip is a great technique to do that. You know, in the case of the flower pots, it was just the observation of her reaction to it. And, you know, I'm used to doing that from seeing people's reaction when they're in trance. You know, I'll ask them a question and they may not say anything, but their body's reacting crazily. And I'll just stop and ask. I'll say, what was that? And they'll say, what was what? And I said, all of a sudden your shoulders just got all out of whack. And if they tune into that, then all of a sudden that guides them. That becomes the thread they can pull to guide them back home again into peace and presence, which is where I think our power and our productivity, you know, actually reside.
So I think this is really, I mean, important, maybe pivotal to this whole conversation. And we've been talking about it for several minutes now, this idea of inner knowing, right? But I just want to underline it because I don't, if possible, for myself and maybe for anyone who's going to watch this, you know, at some point, either now or in the future, this is something that you have to really like trust. And it's not easy to trust. And so I'm trying not to have this be like a self-help thing where you go, oh yeah, trust your inner knowing. Okay, got it. You got to really put something into this, some degree of intentionality, some degree of just leaping and trusting that that the bridge will appear. Which Indiana Jones was that when he takes the step into the abyss? It's one of my favorite scenes in any movie. I think it's Crusader, Last Crusade.
Yeah.
When his dad, Sean Connery's in it. But just, you know, where he takes that step and he just trusts that the bridge is going to be there. And in fact, always was there, but he couldn't see it from his perspective, which is a pretty cool metaphor, really.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, maybe don't do it with the most important decisions in your life, you know, at first. Maybe not decide whether or not you should, you know, get chemotherapy or something based entirely on your gut feeling. But there are probably lots of what you should have for lunch or something like that. Begin to just go with you. And, you know, in Chinese philosophy, we have three brains, right? We have head, heart, and gut. And I think it's very possible that we all have a natural strength in one of those, but all three of them are available. So back to learning what almost yes and no feel like, how you experience that, and taking the time to notice that over and over and over again until you can really take that out into the world and trust it. So that this is not just some, you know, cool idea that really nobody knows what to do with or doesn't take the time or the energy to apply it because, oops, I changed the layout. How did I do that? I'm just so good at this. There we go.
You're just shaking things up a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I at the risk of sounding like I'm rambling about it, I just wanted to say that it's, oops, no, I was trying something that time and it didn't work. We just keep getting Jan's picture. That there's something that we can do to actively get better at this is what I'm trying to point to. And because there may be people again that are watching this that go, this sounds really hard, you know, like so things like Bobby spoke about, taking the time each morning to kind of bring himself down into a more present state. I'm sure everybody here has practices like that we do in some form or other. Go ahead, Jan, what do you do?
One of the things I like to do in the morning before I start my day is just put my hands on my heart and tune into my heart space and just kind of set an intention for whatever's going to happen that day and who I'm going to meet and be with and how I want to be. And it amazes me the difference that it makes.
And how simple is that? Anybody think they couldn't do that? You just couldn't find the time. Maybe it's a little scary to do that. Maybe it's scary to like slow down and put our hands on our heart and really just let what's there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is why, let's, you know, call it what it is. This is why many people have this tendency to go a million miles a minute, because it seems like if we slow down, we may have to feel something that we don't want to feel, and so to really begin to even trust that, like if there is a wisdom, let's put it in these terms. If there really is a wisdom to life, and when I say wisdom in this case, I mean literally infinite wisdom, like unlimited wisdom. Wouldn't it even be like wise to trust that if I'm having some kind of uncomfortable feeling, that even that is part of that wisdom expressing? So to learn to trust that. Yeah,
Yeah.
wherever we have to start
Yeah.
is where we have to start.
Well, I think one of the challenges you have is the conditioning that we've got. For example, like in this particular subject, if you were to say, if any of us were to say to another person, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I've been so busy." Almost the ingrained habitual response in that you are going to get back is, well, busy's good. It beats the alternative. So like the idea of having lots of stuff to do and lots on your plate gets some sort of a reward. And the morning practices, they are easy to do, and they deliver results. And you often find that once you get going back into your habitual routines, the conditioning that we've got just drags you into this internal static mindset. So one of the other things that you can do, whatever kind of a mindfulness presence routine works for you, a cup of coffee, petting your dog, going for a little walk, putting your hand on your heart, doing yoga, meditation, breathing, whatever works for you is something that you ought to pursue. And then I've talked about this technique before, just taking your phone and setting a little timer just to interrupt so that you can check in and ask yourself, how am I doing right now? And, it doesn't have to be something going off every 7 minutes. And in fact, probably would be unproductive if it was, because that would keep you out of getting into a flow state. But if you have it set for 45 minutes and check in, and you're in a state of overwhelm and you're finding yourself time traveling and getting sucked back into that conditioning, use that as an opportunity to pause and go, all right, let me just calm down a little bit here. And it can be just taking 3 or 4 deep cleansing breaths. And my experience has been, and working with clients, the vast majority, 90+% of my clients who do this,
Life
once
changer.
once they've done it for a while, then presence can become their new norm. And once that happens, now all of a sudden, irritation or frustration or anxiety start to become like the rumble strips on the side of the highway or the baby bumpers in the bowling alley that keep you focused again and guide you back. And then you don't need the cell phone anymore. It just becomes, all right, what's going on here? Why, let's take a breath, take a pause, get up and go make a cup of tea or do something else. And once that shift happens, I think everything that we've been talking about on this call starts to get a little bit easier and more natural. Doesn't necessarily mean, it's going to be perfect all of the time. When I had my diagnosis back in November, I broke my phone back out again because, man, my mental static was going crazy. And I got to the point where, for me, it was good to have that interruption coming about every 17 or 18 minutes, because it was taking about that much time to get lost again. So if I just found myself taking a quick break, and by quick I mean under 10 seconds, to just breathe a little bit, going, okay, I'm okay. I'm okay right now. And just kind of slow things down again. And after a while you don't need it anymore. But interrupting the patterns, the hypnosis of social conditioning, I think is
It's
you know,
huge.
it's kind of like a perpetual meditation almost, and presence is your mantra.
So first, I love the like reconditioning to the, when you notice that you're stressed, have that be the sign that you're veering off the road a little bit. That's really good. And if I may, could I add just a tiny bit of science to
Yeah,
the
of course. Yeah.
alarm thing? Because I'm well aware of that alarm thing. And what I learned, and I learned this from somebody who's like literally a PhD in studying like spirituality and how to stay in the present moment. A guy named Dr. Jeffrey Martin, for people who want to check him out. But he said, yes, create a reminder, but have the reminder be random, because the subconscious can actually know that something's coming, and it sort of create, if there's resistance to it, it has all kinds of interesting ways to resist that thing happening. So you have to look for an app. Usually your phone doesn't have a native app that does random. So I know on Android, because it's what I use, the app is called Remind Me, one word. And on, because I actually, in a class of mine, I make this recommendation. So I had to learn the different ones. On iPhones, it's called, I think, Mindfulness Bell. I believe that's what it's called. Has
Okay.
if people can reach out to me afterwards on Facebook or someplace, and I'll double check if I'm wrong. But so the randomness is helpful. And then I just set it to go off about, I think mine goes, and you could even set the hours. So mine goes off 14 times between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. So whatever, not even once an hour. Maybe it's more than 14, but more or less once an hour, I think, is where I have it. So just a way to play around with this. So we are, of course, we can go a few minutes over because we started a few minutes late, but I wanted to hear from Danielle because she's always like up there observing.
Always the quiet one.
Every time she speaks, it's always a contribution. So I want to hear what she has to say.
I love that reconditioning too. And I feel like it took me a very long time. I definitely feel like the tortoise in the hare story, to get into a routine of tapping into my essence first thing in the morning. And I do it different ways because I get bored easily and I don't sit in meditation well. I can do it, excuse me, if I'm guided, but I like to have my own, right? Like I don't want to have somebody else's meditation. I want to have mine. So I've had to find different things, spiritual activations and shorter things that I can do to tap into my essence. But I've made it part of my morning routine now, and I've done this successfully for a while now, to also ask what's next.
Yeah.
The end of that. Like, yeah, what is the energy today? What is my energy today? What's next for me today? And I'll have a long-term goal. Like I had the long-term goal of putting the retreat on. And then the tool that we teach in Mastering the Brain Game is a staircase. So that's on like the 5th stair. And then there are 2 things that you're going to do this day, this week, whatever. And the other 2, you're not allowed to fill in.
Mm.
So there are 2 things that you know, 2 things that you don't know that will come to you as you complete the first 2 things. But that keeps you from getting that list of 4,300 things that needs to get done. You have 2, right?
Yeah.
These 2 are getting done. And when they're done, I can add the next 2 that I know and still leave the 2 that I don't know. And I have room for my intuition to kick in, for the universe to back me up, for whatever languaging you want to use for that. One of my students in Mastering the Brain Game called that, we call it, 1, 2, and gap. And she said, that's God's action plan there, 3 and 4. So whatever languaging works for you, you can use that as a tool to help narrow down the focus of what your productivity is going to be. You're still have your big goal, but you're not allowed to do 52 steps today. You only get to do your 2. If you get them done and you want to do more, you can do more, but they have to get done.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. So you're learning to just be present with some type of system that gives you some kind of a context for your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's the latter or just asking inside, but you begin to notice what works for you. How do you begin to move forward in a way that makes sense? Well, what a friend of mine calls effective action, rather than just flailing around. You're creating, you're intentionally choosing actions that are going to advance your plan in a certain way. So I love that.
Right, and you've lined them up with your priority that way so that
Yeah,
it's important to you.
awesome. Well, we are rounding around to that time now, so I'm just curious who else would like to share some final thoughts. Maybe let us know. I was not able to put your banner and information up there today. That was one technical piece I wasn't able to figure out. So feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know where we can find you. And Jan, why don't you go first?
Thank you. I was trying to unmute. So I'm Jan Hart, and I am based in Ireland, and I'm a peace of mind practitioner. And I work with people that are preoccupied and looking to clear their minds and move forward in various different ways, or working through transitions of different sorts. Tonight's conversation was very interesting from a lot of different angles. I loved the idea that Danielle raised about the self-awareness. And, we all have these natural, what do they call them? Circadian rhythms.
Circadian rhythms, yeah.
And, to be truly productive, we need that rest and recovery piece. But it's only if we're present and aware that we can hear the guidance to go into that ebb for the rest and recovery. I loved that. I could probably stay on all night talking about this topic, but we'll come back to it another time, maybe. So you can find me on Facebook. The easiest way to get in touch with me is to message me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Danielle, what you got?
I got the same thing. I'm on Facebook. You can message me. That's a beautiful topic. I really always enjoy these topics or these discussions, but this one is dear to my heart. Like my basis for my retreat is a book called Questing for Peace and Productivity. By the way of the peaceful whisperer. So it's written by the horse whisperer that certified me.
Very cool. Bobby?
Bobby Cobb. I'm a liberation hypnotist. So I help people free themselves from the blocks that are holding them back. It's more about releasing the conditioning, and liberation hypnosis is about waking people up as opposed to putting them to sleep and getting rid of the debilitating mental thought loops and worn out mental models that are holding us back. I do have a website, Transformative Change, and the trance and transformative is spelled like a hypnotic trance. And I'm also on Facebook, and I've got a group on Facebook called Our Mindful Life. And in that group, if you would like to join in the guides, I've got a program called Spring into Mindfulness, 21 days of very short videos. I think it's a good way to start your day. Each video is between 7 and 15 minutes, I think, and just get you to consider what are you doing in your life that can help you be more present and more mindful and ultimately more productive.
Yeah.
How about you, Fred? Tell us a little bit about how folks can get a hold of you.
Sure. Dr. Fred Blum, I just love sitting with people, helping them to see through this illusory ego version of ourselves that we've all created. And so much of what we talked about, the stress, the unproductiveness, all the anxiety or health problems that can lead to, comes from this false identification, this misunderstanding of who we really are. And it's not a, I mean, it seems like it happens to pretty much everyone, that we create this identity when we're really young, and we become identified with it. Like, this mask that I put on is who I am. And it's hard to imagine. I mean, literally, it's hard to imagine that there's some possibility of living without this mask. And that not only living without it, but that we would actually be thriving, that we would feel a level of peace and clarity and freedom that is almost impossible to imagine from within the mask. So my greatest joy in life maybe is to sit with people and help them, not like with some kind of like punch you in the face, very, generally speaking, very gentle and respectful, but ways for people to see through that mask to who they really are. And, generally speaking, I'm very happy to share this with people the first time on me, because I think of it like test driving a car. You can, sit down and have a conversation via Zoom or local if you're here in the Austin area. So the best way to do that is to find me. I have now the very beginnings of a new website. And if you look up energyrichliving.net, just like it sounds, /test drive, you'll find a simple way to get on my calendar and just, schedule an appointment. And, I think I could speak for all of us that we would welcome the opportunity to share more of what we know and understand and have been practicing for decades, collectively. How much experience do you think is on this call right now? I'm thinking it's over a century.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So think about that, folks. There's a century worth of people making mistakes and screwing up.
I even fell on my ass.
Exactly.
And making new mistakes
and hopefully figuring a little bit of this out along the way. And if nothing else, we're generally pretty nice to talk to. So, take advantage of some of the offers you're hearing, because life works better when you've got somebody at your side kind of helping you through some of the rough spots. That's just I've always had someone like that, and I think it helps. So with that in mind, those final thoughts, we are the Presence Posse. It has been a pleasure being present with you today, or this evening, depending on where you may be. And we don't have Miriam, so I know nobody knows what next week's topic is, do we? We miss you, Miriam.
All is forgiven. Come back.
She is. I some realize how much work she does when I realize that she's not here, and she's almost always here.
Almost always.
So I realize that there's some things that we need to do in advance, but we'll work that stuff out. In the meantime, thanks everyone for watching, and we hope to see whatever we're talking about next week. I'm sure it'll be cool. So
thanks for stepping up, Fred.
Yeah, well done, Fred.
Yeah, well done, Fred.
All right.
And thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.